I once heard a rumor that the producers of Back to the Future learned that there would be a second movie only when the first movie was released at home, and the home release included "To be continued" at the end. Then, when they sat down to consider what a sequel should be, they realized that the movie they wanted to make did not follow freely from the ending they had. You can definitely feel that in this movie. They spend more time cleaning up the mess they left at the end of Part 1 and setting up for Part 3 than actually telling the story they are trying to tell in Part 2. There are so many little plot holes that, rather than filling, the writers simply declare to be fixed. When Biff comes back to 2015 and returns the time machine, Biff disappears. That version of Biff ceases to exist. And yet, his broken cane and the time machine and the fax paper and, well, everything else stay. Doc Brown and Marty are willing to leave Einstein and Jennifer in place, expecting the universe to change around them when the past is fixed. And so on and so forth. There was a time when I was really hard on these kind of lazy plot holes. Anything where the author simply waves his hand and says, "And because I as the author say so, the universe works that way." Then I realized there are plenty of that kind of plot hole in the actual universe. Ice floats on water, even though the general rule is that solids sink in their own solution. It gets colder as you get higher, even though that's closer to the sun and heat rises. If you double a square's width and double the height, the result is more than doubling the area. When you graph the primes on a spiral, it creates lines. Why? Because our author said so. To be clear, I'm not saying there is nothing deeper to any of these questions. There is always something deeper, but when I'm reading fiction and I get to something like these things, my first reaction is always to go, "You've got to be kidding me. Isn't that just a little too convenient for the story you're writing?" But they aren't convenient to the people living in the story. Certainly the people living in the world of Back to the Future have a more robust understanding of time travel that explains the details of when and how these changes come about. The movie is just a story about what happened, not a detailed analysis of efficient and material causes. Someone outside our world reading about floating ice and ice-topped mountain peaks is likely to have the same reply if they lived in a flat, waterless world. Of course mountains would be inaccessible. They would complain. No one really knows what they're like, so the author just put them out of reach and treacherous so that they don't have to think about it so hard. If we could speak directly to that reader, we might try to explain, "No, it's because the air gets thinner, because gravity, because the oceans sink heat, etc." But all that reader is going to do is continue to repeat after each explanation, "Oh, isn't that convenient?" This is one of the things that led me to take the analogy that God is the author of our universe much more seriously. The more I read about emergent properties in particle physics, chemistry, biology, and history, the more I feel an author's hand in our world. Sometimes this intuition gets confused for a God of the gaps argument. God of the gaps is a kind of argument from ignorance. An argument from ignorance says that things are proven to be a particular way since we don't know otherwise. This fails that description on two counts. First, I don't use it to prove anything. I use other methods to find out what kind of God I'm looking for, and when I see these kinds of plot holes in our universe, it's evidence in favor of that view. Second, I'm not working from things we don't know. I'm working from things I do know. I do know that ice floats, and I do know that this is unusual, and I do know that water is necessary for life, and so on and so forth. I do know that writers sometimes have to create these kind of inconsistencies in their universes, that the characters in those universes see them as completely consistent, etc. It all fits together. I would love to hear from others. What kind of plot holes do you see in the universe? Even if you know how they work at a deeper level, what things seem to you to be conveniently inconsistent in our universe?